Welcome to the Writer's Way podcast by Writer's Way Solutions, hosted by Mia Thompson. Today we sit down with author Sidney Krimsky to uncover the heartfelt legacy behind his book, Great Grandma Rose Krimsky. Real stories, real voices. This is Writer's Word.
Good afternoon, it's Mia Thompson. Here with me is Sidney Krimsky and the author of the book, Great Grandma Rose Krimsky. So first, Sidney, may I know what inspired you to write Great Grandma Rose? Like, was it based on a personal family story?
Okay, I'll tell you what prompted me to write the book, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. 3 great-grandchildren are named after my mother, and they were born after she passed away in 2012. They were born later, and the parents of these children are my nieces or nephews, and or grandparents actually, and some of them are my grandchildren, and they have their children, or my great-grandchildren, are named after my mother. They wanted to do that to show honor to my mother, or their great-grandmother. They were born after she passed away. And so, they asked me, we spoke about that, and I said, my great-grandchildren should know something about the person after whom they are named, namely my mother. So that's why I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
I gave it to them. They were 10, 11 years old at the time, and one was a little younger. But I gave them copies of the book, and I gave it to their parents. And I said, you can now understand your great-great-grandmother, my mother, and where we came from, and how we got to be where we are. And that's why I wrote it.
Okay. Now, what was the most challenging part of writing this book?
Oh, very good. That's a good question. The most challenging part is to remember what she taught me and what her life was all about. Because some things she didn't teach me, or some things she did teach me, and I wrote about that. And some things she didn't, but she had many adventures, let's say, or many different things occurring, and I wrote about it. For example, I knew how she lived in Russia before she came here, because she told me about that, and I remembered that, so I wrote about that. So that's part of her life. And then certain things happened that she didn't write about, but I learned about it from my father and from other people. So that's how I learned, from my mother and from other people about how she lived, what her life was all about.
Well, the story of Rose, it really highlights how a strong family legacy can provide wisdom, comfort and direction through generations. So, did you learn anything new about your own family while writing the story?
Not really, because I remembered the story in pieces. In other words, I searched my memory. This took about 6 months, by the way. I had to search my memory, and some things came up to me in a dream, So I have a brother, but my brother passed away about 2.5 years ago, so I couldn't ask him. I would ask him. Oh, by the way, he wrote a book. My brother wrote a book about my mother about maybe 10 years ago, called, the name of the book is My Life as a Childless, My Life as a Motherless Child. And he wrote that book because my mother always complained to him and to me about the fact that when she was born, her father came to America right away. He left the day she was born to come here to save money to bring his wife and his child, who was my mother, to America. It turns out it was not so easy. He worked and worked, and his wife in Russia died 4 years later, we think from the Spanish flu, and she died. So my mother was motherless. My mother grew up motherless, but she was raised by two aunts, one of whom was the sister of her mother who died. And then when she came to America, she had a stepmother, and the stepmother was not nice to her. It was cruel to her, as a matter of fact. The stepmother had 3 children from the father. The father remarried because his wife died when my mother was about 4 years old. So my mother grew up as a motherless child. She had no nurturing, and my brother picked up on that. He was much more sensitive than I was, so he wrote this book and gave it to my mother. It's called My Life as a Motherless Child, something like that, because she had no nurture. I read the book, and as a matter of fact, my daughter has a copy of it, and so I read that book. I read it again, and I picked up some ideas from that book that my brother wrote. But I also remembered a lot of things that I remembered, and then I wrote in the book. So that's how I searched my memory, and I read the book that my brother wrote about 10 or 15 years ago, when my mother was alive, to tell her story. She wanted to tell her story to her grandchildren about how she suffered when she came to America. She was pulled out of school at age 16, and she wanted to graduate junior high school, and she couldn't. They pulled her out. They needed the money. So that happened, of course, all before I was born, you see. So I searched, because I said I read the book my brother wrote, and I searched my memory, and that's how I remembered what to write.
Okay. Now, Great Grandma Rose, it's a story about family, heritage, and wisdom. Now, what key message do you hope readers take away from the book?
Okay. Well, you're asking really good questions, questions that I never thought of myself.
Oh.
You're very good at this. Okay, what message should be taken away? The fact is that someone who came here to America with nothing, she came penniless. She had no money when she arrived in America. She went to, her father sent money to buy steamship tickets from Russia to the United States. Steamship tickets. He worked hard in the garment district for a while, and then he became a painter, but he sent money, and he was married at the time to his second wife. So he didn't advance. My mother came here penniless, and she went to school for a few years, tried to learn English, and she wound up learning English. She worked very hard. She learned English, and she learned arithmetic, how to add, subtract numbers, and she was entered into the second grade in the, let's see, I think the 8th grade, but she wasn't able to graduate. She wasn't able to graduate junior high school. I think you finish junior high school in the United States when you're around 11 or 12 years old, right? That's when you finish. So she left before then. Anyway, the message is somebody coming here penniless, poor, was able to elevate herself. She married my father, who was also poor. He came from Russia also at age 16. And they raised 2 children, my mother. And they lived in poverty because my father worked part-time as a house painter. But she managed to buy only food that was not processed. She bought unprocessed food. In other words, raw carrots, raw potatoes, chicken, vegetables that you buy in the food store. We ate nothing that was processed, and we did not have any soda water, like these soda drinks like Coca-Cola or anything like that in the house. First of all, it was too heavy for her to carry, and secondly, she didn't believe that all that sugar was good for us. This was way ahead of her time. She knew she was very thin. She kept her weight down. She knew that sugar wasn't good for her, and I learned from that. And that's why I learn what I say, and my mass balance is well below 300. Yeah, that's from mass balance. That's your weight divided by the height, or your height divided by the height divided by the weight. It's a number that's been used in the newspapers to identify people that are obese or overweight. It's called the weight balance or mass balance, and it's supposed to be less than 300. It's a weight. They use the weight in kilograms, and the height has to be squared, and the height I think is in centimeters. Anyway, I have the number. I have it all written down in one book I wrote about blood testing. So I have the number. In any case, I learned from her what to eat and what not to eat, because we ate only unprocessed foods. And she ate that in Russia. She ate food from the garden. They had a garden in Russia, and they planted and they ate in the summertime food from the garden. Like beet and carrots and cauliflower and things like that you can plant. And then when she came here, she struggled. She struggled very hard. She married my father, and both of them struggled. They really had no money. There was no Social Security came into effect much later. But in any case, they had no money. They struggled, and they worked hard. My mother didn't work until my father died, but they supported me and my brother. So we were able to go to school. We went to junior high school, and then college, and then graduate school. My brother was a professor at Tufts University. He had 4 college degrees, and the last one was a PhD, and he wrote 14 books. My brother wrote 14 books about the environment, about food toxicity, genetic engineering, things like that. And they were sold on Amazon, I guess. They're highly technical books. He was a professor at Tufts University, and he lectured about these subjects. Long before they became popular, he was talking about contamination in food from genetic engineering a long time ago. You know, she struggled. The message is, if you work hard and you struggle, you can really do well in the United States. There's an opportunity here in the United States, not true in many other countries. And it's the third generation that usually does well. My mother was the first generation. I'm the second. When I left college, I had no money there. Even though I worked during the summers, but I really didn't have much money. But I worked hard as an engineer, and I made money. I did very well. I bought a house. My wife and I got married. We bought a house in Boston. And my children are doing even better. They went to school, they went to college, and they have bigger houses, and they have many children. My one son has 7 children, and they're enjoying a good life because they had a solid education. In some ways, maybe better than mine. But they had a solid education. They learned, and they interacted with me. I couldn't really interact with my parents because they spoke English, but they didn't go to school. They really didn't know very much, you know. So I couldn't interact with them. I interacted with my teachers in school. So the message is, if you come here to this country, like the immigrants come from South America, let's say, or all around the world, if you work hard and you follow the laws of this country, and you go to school, and you work hard in school, you can do well. You can achieve the American dream. That's the message.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, exactly. Now, going back to Rose's journey, it is, is filled with trials, yet she faces each one with remarkable strength, resilience, and grace. Now, it emphasizes that no matter the obstacles, we can navigate life's hardships with courage and poise. Like everyone right now, faces difficulties at some point. Well, I know that sharing stories of strength like Rose can inspire others to approach their struggles with the same determination and grace, right? And also
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, fostering a mindset as well that is resilience and hopeful. So, with this one, I'd like to know, how important do you think it is to preserve and, share family stories across generations?
This is well, you're really very good. Are you a journalist by any chance? You should be, because you're very good at this. It's important, I think, to share stories of what happened in the last generation. For example, from 1940 to 1945, there was a Holocaust. Many Jewish people were murdered by the Nazis. You know about that. It's important for such stories to be told, not to be forgotten. People who do extraordinary things, who work very hard, their story should be told to influence and to inspire present generation of children. That no one is behind. No one can be behind. If you work hard, if you work really hard at it, you can achieve what you want to achieve. If you work hard, you'll get somewhere. You'll do much better than your parents, perhaps, and much better than your grandparents. My great-great-grandfather came here. He was a rag. He sold rags. He worked in New York City, the pushcart, and he sold rags. He sold women's dresses and, with a pushcart. He was a rag, and he bought and sold old clothing and fixed it up, and then he sold it. People were very poor then, and so such a garment like a dress might have cost maybe 50 cents, something like that, because people were very poor. Of course, there was no inflation, or inflation was minimal. But I knew about him, and I knew what he did, because my grandfather told me that his father was a pushcart peddler in Brooklyn, in New York City, and what he did. So my grandfather told me. He told me stories. I only wish that I had spoken to him more and was able to ask him the same kinds of questions you're asking me. I wasn't smart enough to be able to communicate with him the way you're communicating with me and asking, these questions. I wish I had, but I didn't. And I also wish that I had spoken to my aunt, who came from Russia, by the way, about how they lived there, what their life was like, how they struggled. They struggled, they came here, they worked hard, they were poor, but their children, my cousins, became accountants, they became insurance agents, and one became eventually a lawyer and a judge. These were third-generation people. The grandparents lived in Russia. The children came here and they were poor, and their children went to school and achieved something really wonderful. You see what I mean? So these stories are inspiring, and the past generation should know about the history of what happened and how the United States got to be where it is. We're the most powerful country in the world, and probably the country that gives the most opportunity to its residents if you're willing to work. You know what's going on in South America and Europe and so on, and these countries don't compare with the opportunities available here in the United States. The education that's available to everybody, poor or rich, you have an opportunity to go to school. I went to schools in New York City that were free. City College was free. I had to pay no money. $25, I think, was the annual cost, a general cost for everybody. $25. But I had to pay for books, and I worked during the summertime. I worked for selling hot dogs in the summertime, so I was able to pay for books, for testing a book. And I did, but it was free. And my cousins also got a free education in the city of New York. Isn't that amazing? And they became professional.
Exactly. Now, I can see it that, passing down the stories and, this kind of memories not only preserves family history, but also strengthens the emotional ties between generations. Like, it would remind people of the love, support, and connections that bind families together. Even if there will be an across generation apart from that. So
absolutely right. As a matter of fact, another book I wrote, I don't know if you know this, it's called Leaving Mother Russia. Leaving Mother Russia. It's a book I wrote, I published, and it's available, I think, on Amazon. And I published it. I wrote the book because two families where I live in West Hempstead, Long Island, two families approached me. They knew I had written a book before called From Brooklyn to Brookline, which is an autobiography. So they knew I knew how to write. They came from Russia as immigrants. They ran away with their wives and husbands because the conditions there were very bad. They were prejudiced, and if you didn't conform to what they wanted, they punished their children in school and so on. Anyway, they came to America, and they became naturalized American citizens. They learned English, and they work. One works as a barber, and the other one works as a bookkeeper, as a secretary. Anyway, they asked me to write about their family history, leaving Russia, the trials, the difficulties, the tribulations, the challenges, and coming to America. And I did that. I wrote about that for them. I wrote the book, and I interviewed them for hours. I spoke to them. They spoke English. They learned English, but they couldn't write. They came from Russia. They couldn't write, not the way I do anyway, because, they came here in 1975, 76. And so I agreed to do this. So I sat down with them for hours, and they dictated to me. They told me what they had gone through, and I wrote it all down, and I wrote a book about their experience. Gave them free copies, and I enjoyed doing that because I learned something from them, and they learned something from me. Because when I was born in America, my parents came from Ukraine, from Russia. That's where they came from Uzbekistan and all those places in belonging to Russia. And so I wrote this to them, and the parents experienced the same kind of difficulties, and their children went to college. And they one was studying medicine to become a doctor. He could not have done that in Russia. But here he could do it. Here he could do it. The parents were grateful for that. And they were very grateful for me writing this book about them, how they came here and acclimated themselves to the United States. And they wanted to give, children and give them the book. And I gave them 3 copies of the book.
Wow.
You see what I mean? You see what I mean?
Yeah. Well, have you received any feedback from readers who connected with Great Grandma Rose's story?
Not really, not yet. No, I have not. My children read it because I gave them 3 copies, and they were surprised by what they read, but I never received any written commentaries or anything like that. See, my grandchildren knew my mother. It's the great-grandchildren that never knew her, because my mother lives to about 88 years old, 89 years old, and so my grandchildren would visit her. They would visit her. She lived in Newton, Massachusetts, in a senior housing. But they would visit her. She would give them snacks and so on, and she doted on her grandchildren. And eventually she passed away, and her grandchildren had children, and they never knew her. You see, that's my great-grandchildren. They never knew her.
Oh.
So my children liked the story. They liked what I did. They appreciated it, and they're passing it on to their children, who are my great-grandchildren. So that's the only, so I never really received any written feedback or anything of my children. I wouldn't expect that, but I'm sure they appreciated what I wrote and the pictures in the book. I put pictures in the book of their Russian relatives. Russian relatives. Because we had one relative, my uncle. My father came here, and sisters came to America in 1924 and 26. But one son did not come. He was used to come to America. He wanted to build the Soviet Union, and so he did not come. He was either drafted or he entered the army, the Russian army, when he was 20 years old. So everybody left. His sisters left, his mother left, and his father came here also in 1910. So he was left alone. He joined the Russian army, and then World War II broke out, you know that, 1939. So he was naturally in the army, and so he fought against the Germans, against the Nazis, and was retired when the war ended in 1945. He was retired with a pension of some kind from the Russian government. So he finally one of my aunts knew him and contacted him, was able to get a hold of him, and brought him to the United States for a visit. His wife was not allowed to come, but he came for a visit, and he saw how we live. We live in nice homes, nice houses. I had a big apartment, 5-room apartment, and I had one son at that time. I had 3 children. But at that time I had one son. He was about 2 years old, and he traveled to California to visit his sisters. He saw how we lived, so he realized he wouldn't say this except when he was dying. He said that he made a mistake not coming to America, you see. He made a mistake. So he had one son named Salim, One son studied, he studied in a technical school. He went to college for nothing, for free, in Russia, and he studied metallurgy. He was a metallurgist. But when he finished, he did not want to work in metallurgy. Why? Because it meant he would have been working in a company or a plant that might have connections to the Soviet government, and he would never be able to be allowed to leave, or he'd be suspect as a potential spy. So he went to school at night, and he learned music, and he learned how to write music, and he wrote symphonies. He became a Russian composer, and he came to the United States twice. I housed him in my house, my home. He stayed with us, and he had 2 children, both of whom were in the music business. So the Russian government never bothered them, because if you're in music, you're not in politics. You're just a musician, you play in an orchestra, or you sing, or you do, gymnastics, or ballet, or something like that. The Russian government doesn't bother these people, because they're artists. They're artists. Okay. They paint, they draw, they play musical instruments. The Russian government doesn't bother them. They're not in politics. They don't do anything with politics. This is what happened. So my cousin, he came here, and his music was played at Tufts University. That's why he came. He wrote music. They found an orchestra for him, and the music that he wrote was played at Tufts. He came here twice. But his conditions living in Russia were very poor, very miserable. How do I know this? Because my brother went there, and he saw the conditions under which they live. His son, this is my cousin, the conditions under which they live were very poor. He and his father, who was my uncle, their conditions were pretty crummy. The housing they lived was built by the state. The Russian state built the housing, and it was poorly maintained. Anyway, he had 2 children, one son and one daughter. This guy, Salim, my cousin. His son worked in computers. He learned English, and he communicated with me in English with computers. He had a job with a Moscow law firm, who lost him in Moscow. So, when the war started with Ukraine and Russia, he ran away.
Uh-huh.
He ran away from his job in Moscow, working in a law office. He might have been studying law. At that time, he was in his 30s. He ran away to Kyrgyzstan, which is near Kazakhstan. It's outside of Russia. It's one of these countries that has a provisional government with Russia. And he stopped sending me emails because the emails could be traced, and he would be arrested and tried for treason and put into jail. That's why he ran away. He ran away from Russia. Like the son of my cousin ran away. I was communicating with him. His parents lived in Moscow. They were too ill. They couldn't be drafted. That's because of the war that happened between Ukraine and Russia. There's a war that's going on right now. You know that. They're killing each other. And my cousin, the son of my cousin, they lived in Ukraine for a while, in Kiev, and then they moved to Moscow. So they knew people in Ukraine, and you don't want to go join the army to kill them or to kill their children. That's not nice. That's cruel. So he ran away so he wouldn't have to be drafted and he wouldn't be shooting at anyone. But he stopped communicating with me because the emails could be traced. You see, they could be traced. Even letters are traced, too. Yeah. The Russian government examines everything. You can't send them packages now. The post office won't allow it, by the way. So, you know, something like that could not happen here in America. People come and go all the time here in the United States. Even if you violate the law and you put on bail, you can still you can leave the area, maybe not the country, but you can leave. And in general, if you behave yourself, you can leave the country and come back. You can leave with your wife or your children. He could not leave with his wife when he left Russia to come here for a month or two, just to be with his siblings, his brother and his sisters. He couldn't bring his wife here. They wouldn't allow it. They were afraid he would defect to the United States, so his wife couldn't come. I never met his wife, my uncle's wife, my aunt. I never met her. She never came here. I couldn't go there because I worked for the federal government, and they told me, the lawyers told me, see, don't go to Russia or any of those communist countries. You may be arrested. Because I worked for the government, for the Department of Defense. So I was feared, and they told me, the members of the DOD, they told me, you must not go to Russia, okay? There are bugs in the hotels and everything else, and they may arrest you as being a spy because you work for the government. So I never went there. My brother went there because he worked for a university, and he was in a different situation. I don't know if that helps you to understand anything. I hope that helps you understand, where I came from and what this is all about.
Yeah. Well,
a lot of information. I know it's a lot of information for you to absorb, but I teach this to my kids, my grandchildren. They know the history. And in the book about Grandma Rose, I put the photographs of our relatives in Russia. I took photographs. The photographs were taken in the 1970s or 1980s. They came here in 1970 and 72, I think, to play this music at Tufts University in Medford, Massachusetts. So I took photographs that I got that my brother took. And so my children, my great-grandchildren will know they have relatives in Russia. The man who ran away, the son of my cousin who ran away, I think he's the last Krimsky in Russia. The last. Because Krimskys have been in Russia and Ukraine for about 400 years. So he's the last one. You see, his parents live there, but they're getting old. And they don't have any more children. So he's the last Russian in, the last Krimsky in Russia.
Yeah. It's good, Sidney, it's really good that you're able to pass down the message, experiences to your children, to your grandchildren. Now, what do you hope families and children take away from reading Great Grandma Rose together?
I'm hoping that they take away the fact that there's a context in which they were born. In other words, nobody was born out of context. I don't know, which country did you come from? Were you born in this country or did you come from another country?
I'm calling you from Houston, Texas, by the way.
Okay, Houston, Texas. Were you born here or were you born elsewhere?
I was born here.
Okay, you were born here. Okay, you were born here. So your background is based on being born here And I don't know where your parents came from, but they probably told you what life was like when you were born here in Texas or wherever. You know, you grew up in Texas. It's a great state of Texas. I've been there a few times as a tourist. It's a great state. I went to the Alamo, as a matter of fact. I went to the Alamo. I walked around the Alamo. And the Alamo is a great place for teaching children what they have to do, how they struggled to free themselves from the Mexicans. You know, Texas became after they broke away from Mexico, Texas became an independent country. You know that. Independent country, and there was a big discussion about whether they should join the United States. Texas could have been an independent country, but they decided to join the United States, and they became a state, part of the U.S. And the U.S. government purchased from Mexico, Arizona, Texas, and California. We bought those states really belonged to Mexico. They were part of the Mexican, establishments. And we bought those states from Mexico. We paid them money. And we bought it from them, legally. Properly, they sold it to us. And Texas broke away from Mexico because they had a revolution. And they broke away from Mexico. Yeah, they lost the Battle of Alamo, but they fought back later and became a separate state under Sam Houston. And then they decided to join the United States of America. And they did. And they were accepted. And they became part of the, of our country. And for people growing up there, they had quite a different story. If you lived during that time, you had a story to tell about the fighting, the battles going on between the Mexicans and the Texans, and the arguments in the Texas State House about whether they should join the United States. Because there were arguments against joining the United States. The pros and cons of everything. People do not live in isolated lives. Everyone who's born here has historical connections of some kind because of their parents. So they have historical connections. And they should learn about these connections because those connections made who they are. It's made because their parents, inherited those connections, and the children should know who they are or what the background are. If you're born here as an Indian, your parents are American Indian, that's a certain background. If you came from Africa and you're black, then you have a certain background. They should learn about what it is, what their background is, and how they adapted, or their parents adapted to America, why they adapted, and how they adapted, and how they benefited from being here. You see what I mean? Children should learn this. They were not born in isolation. Nobody was born here in isolation. Everybody has parents who had a background of some kind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, anyhow, may I know how have you been promoting Great Grandma Rose? Like, do you have any upcoming events, or book signing?
No, I never had any book signing. One of the books I wrote, they scheduled a book signing occasion in New York City at the Javits Center, which is a big commercial center in New York. And I was supposed to go there, and I had copies of books, and I'd sign them and so on. Well, it's a book fair. And it was canceled because of COVID. That was in 2020. They canceled it because of COVID, and they built a hospital in the Javits Center between beds and their doctors and nurses and all kinds of medicine. Because COVID was so widely spreading in New York City, so they decided that the hospitals could not handle it. So they had it at the Javits Center, and so the book signing was canceled. But some of my books have been displayed in the London Book Fair and Chicago Book Fair, and I really got no ROI, no return on my investment. And I just spend money on marketing, but I got nowhere. So I stopped it. All right, people are not interested in buying it. That's okay. I'm not bothered by it. But I just spend money on marketing. And as far as this book goes, I didn't spend any money on marketing at all. I just bought 20 copies and I gave them out to my children and grandchildren. And but I'm not spending any money to market the book. The only money I would spend is on moving Mother Russia. I bought a trailer. That's like a 3-minute video for that. because somebody wanted to make a movie out of that book. I needed a trailer, so I paid for a trailer. But to make a movie, the scriptwriters may get $20,000 or $30,000 for doing this. And I'm not about to spend that kind of money for questionable results. So I didn't do it. But people, once in a while, they still call me about making a movie from the book Leaving Mother Russia. So I told them, they want to make a movie, go ahead, make a movie, borrow money. Don't get it, so you're not getting it from me. Borrow money and keep 98% of the profits. And I'll sign up to that.
Okay. Now, would you consider adapting your book, Great Grandma Rose, into another format, such as an audiobook, animated short, or a children's educational program?
I never thought of that.
Oh.
I never really thought of that because I'm not into children's education. I did teach mathematics for 9 years after I retired. I worked at a Huntington Learning Center, and I tutored high school students, mathematics, high school math. I know that very well, and I tutored them for 9 years. And but I never thought of making an e-version or e-book from Grandma Rose to make it easy to. If somebody wants to do that, I'll give them permission to do it. If they want to do it, I authorize them to do it. They can keep the profits from that, or 95% of the profits, because I still own the book. I own the rights to the book. If somebody wants to do something with it and make money, that's okay with me. I'll sign up, giving them permission to do it, and they can keep 98% of the profits. I don't care. But I don't plan to do this myself.
Oh, okay.
I know enough to do right now dealing with other issues, like taxes, for example. And the last book I published is a math book, and I'm waiting for the publisher to print. I'm waiting for the printer to finish, so I can buy a few copies myself. So I'm dealing with all these other kinds of issues. But I didn't think of making it into a children's book.
Okay.
Yeah. You know what? I give the book to my grandchildren, my great grandchildren. My grandchildren are out of school already, except for one. They all graduated college, but my great grandchildren are in school, and they can show the book to their teacher. And if their teacher is interested in getting copies and making a smaller version, I might be interested in doing that. But I don't expect to make any money from this. Not at all.
Now, what advice would you give to someone who wants to write a book based on family history?
Oh my goodness, what a question! My advice, you're really good. You're really good at this. My advice is to try to record everything you know about the person you want to write about, or people you want to write about. Write it down on paper. Don't lose it, because you can't remember everything. And then you have to put it all together. Someone else wrote a book. My neighbor wrote a book about his life experience. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year and a half ago. But he wrote a book, a very thick book. It's in soft cover, and it's about his life. I'll read you the title of the book. And I have a copy myself, because he happened to be our neighbor. He was our neighbor, family, and they were living next. So his life, the name of the book is My Life's Journey. My Life's Journey from Ludlow Street, that's in Brooklyn, and to Long Beach. Ludlow is a poor section of Brooklyn, New York, very poor at that time. I think East New York or Bronzeville, Ludlow Street, to Long Beach. Long Beach is a beautiful community for people with some wealth here in Long Island. It's Long Beach is right by the ocean, and there are beautiful condos. And he worked hard as a teacher, as an administrator in school, in various public schools, and also private schools. He married, he had 2 children, and unfortunately passed away about a year and a half ago. He fell down and injured his hip, and he never got well after that. Anyway, his wife vacations in Florida, and she's very friendly with us. We get along very well. Right now she's in Florida. She doesn't like the cold weather. But he wrote this book about his experience, and it's quite thick. It's much thicker and bigger than the book I wrote about my mother, because he wrote about his own experience He was a basketball coach and a basketball player and a school administrator. And he earned a PhD, by the way, in education, too. So he wrote this book about his own family life. And I don't know, it wasn't meant to sell or anything, but it's a book, the same purpose. I wrote my book for his children and his grandchildren to read.
For this one, I want to know what is your, is there anything else you'd like to share about Great Grandma Rose or your journey as an author so that they'll be able to know as well?
Yeah, well, I never expected to be an author, actually. Since I moved here, and after I retired from work as an engineer, working for the government for 20 years. I worked 20 years for the federal government. I managed $10 million programs. And when I never considered myself an author, but when I moved here to West Hempstead, which is in Long Beach, Nassau County, I realized I had some time in my hands, and I wanted to teach my children and grandchildren what life was like during the 1950s. My children were born after that. And life during the 1950s in New York City was totally unlike what it is today. Totally unlike. It's totally different. And I wrote all that in my first book that I wrote, which is called From Brooklyn to Brookline. I was born in Brooklyn, but my wife and I moved to Brookline, Massachusetts, after we met in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so I wrote that book after I retired, because I wanted my children to learn about what life was like in the 1950s, or anybody should like. It's like living then was totally different than life today. In New York City and in Coney Island, where I lived, it's totally, in Brooklyn, it's totally different. So I wanted my kids to learn about that. For example, the subways in New York City, at that time it cost 15 cents. And they were safe, very safe. I was 10, 11 years old. I took the trains by myself.
Wow.
Once I took my to a baseball game. He was around 7 or 8 years old. I took him on the subway myself. My mother was had a little bit of anxiety, but we were safe. Nobody bothered us. Nobody irritated us. There was no shootings in New York, no stabbings, nothing like that. And nobody slept in the subway either. The subways were safe in New York. That's a small example of what life was like in the 1950s. Subways were safe. People parked on the street, and there was two-way traffic, and people behaved themselves when they were driving cars. We didn't have any people driving cars without licenses and so on. It was very safe. I would also go out at night, just to get some fresh air, especially in the wintertime. From school, I'd take an hour off and I'd go for a walk. Nobody bothered me. There was a bar not far away from where we lived, about 4 or 5 blocks. People came in and out of the bar, but nobody bothered me. I was just a kid, walking on the boardwalk. I didn't have much money. I didn't have any money. But it doesn't matter. Nobody bothered me. And it was a lot different than it is today. People are afraid to walk out at night and to use the subways. They're complaining because I'm in New York City, and the subways, people are shot. A few weeks ago, somebody was burned alive. A woman was burned alive. She was sleeping on the subway. And some crazy guy sprayed her with a liquid and set a match on fire. It was in the newspapers. It was all on television, newspapers. You see, something like that was unheard of. Also, stabbings and shootings in school? My God. I went to high school for 2 years. I never had it. There was never no stabbings, no shootings, no fights, nothing like that. Everybody was in school to learn. Many of them were the children of immigrants, and they wanted to learn.
And we can really see the difference right now, from the last generation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And all I can see here, all I can say is this Great Grandma Rose is more than just a family memoir. It's a book that embodies love, strength, and the timeless nature of family. And by spreading the lessons from this book, we can remind others of the importance of family, resilience, empathy, and connection to the past. Now,
well, I wish I spoke to you before I wrote the book. I would have included these words. You're very smart. You're very well attuned to this. But I didn't speak to you before I wrote the book. But you're absolutely right in your analysis. You're absolutely right.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sidney. It's really nice having with you in this the interview, okay? I believe that your book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles,
Yeah.
or any online. So with that, Sidney, again, thank you so much for participating.
Okay, you too, Mia. Thank you very much
interview.
for asking me these good questions.
Okay.